didn't get a chance to meet you. I'm Dave Coonwright.
Oh, hey.
You're going to let me kick things off.
Okay.
Daryl?
Adams, yeah.
Is the mic line just...
It's on. I have it muted here.
Okay.
So whenever you walk up to it, I can unmute it.
In about another minute or so, you can make me live and ask everybody to move closer. Try to get things going.
All right.
Also, since we have so many doors, people didn't go through the side door. We had the sign-in sheet, so there will be a sign-in sheet going around. If you don't mind signing in so we knew you were here, we can send you follow-up information on this event. That would be great. And then, secondly, the way we're going to do Q&A is by postcard, by flashcard. So there's flashcards in the back, and I think there are flashcards on the sign-in sheet. I'll have some up here as well. Write your question down, raise your hand, and there'll be people walking around grabbing the postcard. Just makes it easier that way for everyone here. Thank you very much.
postcards for possible question writing. You don't have to write a question.
Good evening again, everyone. It's nice to see everybody here on a beautiful, seems like a summer evening, but we're all gathered here for a single purpose that we'll talk about here shortly. My name is Dave Coonrod. I've had some affiliation with Greene County over the years and have a great interest in the environment and especially water and karst. What I want to tell you tonight is just a few things about what's brought us to this point. And when I say us, I'm talking about Dan Childs, who's right there. Dan Childs and I go way back to really right before first grade. We were neighbors and grew up together. And how would we know that almost 7 years later, we'd be talking about corporate pigs and the industrial waste that comes out of a slaughterhouse that's just up north of us at Pleasant Hope. It's a whole other story, but it's part of the unfolding future that we're experiencing. And I just Todd told me to take as much time as I want, but he said I had about 4 minutes, so I'm going to really move quickly. Dan and I realized that for the last 7 or 8 years, the Missouri legislature has really caused us problems. And Mike Schilling was still there. We went to see that. Mike Lee, former state legislator. We also have Stephanie Hine, who's here. We really appreciate Stephanie about doing this. You know, we have some competent legislators, but unfortunately, we also have a supermajority that we have to deal with. And we know from what we've seen and experienced that over the last 7 or 8 years, they've eroded the ability for us to manage and deal with threats to our water systems and our water quality, and most importantly for us, of course, our drinking water supplies. So Dan and I have endeavored on this guardrail project that is still in its infancy, but we're moving right along. And we are talking to people about this issue, and most people don't know what to talk about. They like bacon, I like bacon, everybody likes bacon for the most part. But the thing is that there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. Right now, we've just opened the floodgates for doing it the wrong way. We have issues in McDonald County right now that they're wrestling with. They have no ability to control because our local control was taken away. I was the presiding commissioner of this wonderful county of Greene for a long time, and over 2 decades. And we experienced the ability at that time to maintain our property values, maintain our safe drinking water through local rules and standards that we put together. That's been taken away from us, and we need to get back. And there's several ways that we're going to try to do that as the days and possibly months and weeks unfold. Dan and I did that for a year. We are going to walk the halls of the legislature again next year. We are going to keep talking to people and having lots of breakfasts and lunch and explaining the real threat out there. I'll leave you with this though. When we get up every day, I think most of us, without a second thought, turn on our tap, and it's clean. You can drink right out of it. And that's because we have a really good water operation here in Greene County, which is Springfield City Utilities. Now there's other entities that also operate water systems, but they're groundwater main. CU has a host of things, a host of resources to draw from, and one of the main ones is Stockton Lake. And so it's our hope, the guardrail project, so that we can foster some kind of immediate legislation that says to everyone, Stockton Lake is a municipal watershed, it's important, we want to protect it, we want special rules and guidelines to apply to it. Please work with us on this. We're going to be serving 1 million people because everybody's running out of groundwater. That's the issue in front of us, folks. You've got water issues for water quantity, water quality, and you've got the deck stacked against us right now. And so Todd is going to tell us tonight, Todd Parnell's here. He's going to explain to us, with the help of his panel, how we're going to get at this problem. And we're so happy to have Dr. Chris Jones here as well. He'll be meeting later, and I look forward to a really informative evening, and I thank you for putting up with me for 4.5 minutes.
They said I'm supposed to have some remarks too, but I know you want to hear from the experts, and that's why you're here tonight. And mine are going to be very short. We're grateful that you took the time to join us tonight. This is an important presentation to be able to bring these experts to Springfield to honor Chris's book, which I hope everybody will walk back to the back and buy before you leave here. But basically, learn from their expertise. Each of them said to me, we do not want this to be a confrontation. We want it to be education. We want it to be communication. There's a time for confrontation, and we will have it. There's no question about it. But tonight is our chance to deal with some experts, one-on-one, ask them questions, learn from them, give them something they can learn from us about, but let's make this an informational session that all of us walk out and feel better about and more optimistic about the future and protecting our waters. There are special people I need to thank for tonight, and I'm going to do that very quickly. We've already heard from David, but I really want to thank the Missouri Guardrails Project. That's David, that's Dan, and that's Kathy. Thank them because they've helped sponsor this, they've helped defray some of the expenses of it. They're doing great work on the ground, but they also are really been supportive of this. I want to thank the Ozark Society. Our local chapter, Schoolcraft, is also a sponsor of this. I want to thank Ethan Duke and Dana Ripper of the Missouri River Bird Observatory, and Ashley Busey of the Socially Responsible Agriculture Project for participating in this tonight and for being supportive of it. I want to thank Anna Crow and Brewer University for hosting us tonight. And I want to thank Cheryl Markham, as I always do, because she is our cheerleader. She's the one that helps us communicate to you, to draw as many people here as we possibly can. And you see what color? Cheryl, raise your hand, Bridget. What color does she have on? Blue. What color do I have on? Blue. We are honoring one of the rare successes we've had in a long time about standing up to Missouri meatpacking and at least getting the initial battle won, if not the war. Doug, where are you? Is he here? Doug, did I miss anybody? Anybody I'm supposed to thank other than that? That's it. Okay. Well, there is one other one I want to thank. That's him, Doug Doty. He helped organize this, not just this event, but the whole Missouri part of this. And I have a special debt to him because he took Lori Bullard and I into northern Missouri last year, and he showed us around CAFO country. And you talk about an eye-opening, frightening experience. It's not just Iowa anymore. Northern Missouri is where it's at now, and it's headed this way. And our politicians, as David said, have bought into the theory that corporate agriculture is economic development and nothing else matters. Not water, not small towns, not the things that corporate ag destroys. And they are pushing that, and we have to stand up to it. I know personally how strong they are because I've served on the Missouri Clean Water Commission for 10 years, and I got fired, along with 3 of my fellow commissioners, because we voted against 2 CAFOs, and that wasn't acceptable to the governor or the legislature. So we got fired. One of them was in Trent, Missouri, which is one of the places Doug took me. So we got replaced by 4 commissioners that had agricultural ties, and they immediately approved them. So that's what we're up against, and that's why it's so wonderful that all of you are here tonight. Housekeeping details, the restrooms are back there, the books are back there, everybody remember where the books are, and there's an agenda we're going to follow, which I'll share with you briefly, so we can try to get out of here by 8 o'clock. I'm going to introduce the moderator of the roundtable, and as well as some of the members. And then Tim Gibbons, who's going to be the moderator for the discussion, is going to take over. And he will run it through the question and answer period. And then at the end, I'm going to bring up John Moore to have some closing comments. And of course, ask Chris if he has anything he wants to add before coming. We're very honored that you came down here, spending time with us. All of you panelists, we're really, really grateful. It means a lot. It gives us impetus. It gives us enthusiasm. And that's what we need to stay down. So with that, I want to run through the agenda. I guess the next thing I'm doing is introducing the members of the discussion. I'm going to start with Tim Gibbons, who's going to be the moderator. Tim has been with the Missouri Rural Crisis Center since 2005. They represent independent family farmers, rural families, the communities, and citizens concerned with our food supply, our natural resources, and democracy. Tim works to organize a large membership base of farm families, rural citizens, and other Missourians to challenge the industrialization and the corporate control of agriculture in our democratic process. Also want to introduce Jess Piper, is a born and bred Southerner, she says, and having spent her childhood and young adulthood in several southern states until she landed in Arkansas. She graduated with a BA in English and MA in education from the University of Arkansas. She is a fierce advocate for rural communities and public schools. She was an American literature teacher for 16 years, continues her activism as the executive director of Blue, Missouri, and hosts a weekly podcast called Miracle in Denver. Next is Curtis Millsap. He's one of the four that's going to be up here on the panel. Curtis and Sarah Millsap have owned and operated Millsap Farms just north of Springfield for 15 years. Curtis grew up on the river, taking his first overnight float when he was 4 weeks old, and has logged thousands of river miles, mostly on the Buffalo 11-point Jackson. His passion for rivers and clean water has guided his farming as he sought a way to make a living off of 20 hilltop acres in the Ozarks. Millsap Farm is an diverse environment with vegetables, cut flowers, perennials, and forests combined into an ecologically sensitive entity. The Millsaps love to share their farm with their community and are especially passionate about encouraging others to consider farming and land stewardship as a vocation. And then finally, the reason we really are gathering, and that's Chris Jones has joined us. He is on a book tour and a speaking tour about his newly released Swine Republic, Struggles with the Truth About Agriculture and Water Quality. And we're delighted to have you here, Chris, and to have your book here. He's a retired research engineer, retired abruptly this year after many years researching and writing about Iowa's water quality. He worked with the Iowa Soybean Association, the Des Moines Water Works prior to his time at the University of Iowa. And his new book is a collection of his work, much of which led to the controversy over funding the stream monitoring system he ran before leaving the University of Iowa. I've not read the book yet, but I have acquired 3 copies, and I'm going to read one and give the other 2 to my children. And I've read his columns, and we're in for a treat, that's all I can say. So will you join me, please, in welcoming our 4 panelists? Thank you.
Hi y'all, I'm Tim. I'm going to try to moderate this wily bunch here. I'm just going to start off with Chris. I want to say thank you for being here. I'm with Missouri Rural Crisis Center, like Todd mentioned, we're a group that fights for independent family farmers, surviving rural communities, and more democratically diversified food system. And I think we're going to get right into it. This is a really important issue, really close to all our hearts. Thank you.
So thank you for coming tonight. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Okay. So anyway, my name's Chris Jones. I'm from Iowa and had a good 2 days down here in Missouri, and I got to meet a lot of great people. And so Todd, I want to say, since tonight's not about confrontation, then you got a little salty. So, and I always say when I do my programs, I want people to leave mad, okay? I want you to leave here mad about what could happen to your state and the environment around you. And, you know, one thing that struck me while I've been down here is I hear people say, oh, we have 400 CAFOs, whatever exactly it was, 500 CAFOs. We have 8,000 CAFOs, okay, in a state that's half again as large as Missouri. And so I think you have some real things to think about, right? And so I will tell you, I can tell you that corporate agriculture will take it all. They will take it all if you let them, because it happened in Iowa. And loss of local control over the permitting and siting of livestock facilities in Iowa, it has ruined Iowa. It has ruined Iowa. I make no bones about saying that. So when you leave here tonight, I just ask you to keep those two things in mind. Is that what we're doing? Oh, no, I think you said. Okay, well, then I'm going to do the slides. So Doug had seen a program of mine, and in fact, I taught a class in October at the University of Iowa called Senior College. It's for senior citizens. And it was on water quality. And he asked me to show the slides that I had presented there about the Missouri River. And he thought that would be a good thing to talk about here tonight. And so this is an example of how they will take it all. It happened a long time ago, but they took it. And so we know Iowa and Missouri both have the two big rivers on their borders. The Missouri River, you see there, a humongous watershed, right? It goes all the way to the continental shelf. One of the largest river basins on Earth. The Missouri is the longest river in the U.S. It's not the Mississippi. There we have another look at the basin and then the dams of Missouri. And the headwaters of the Missouri, a lot of times we think they're in Yellowstone Park. They aren't. They're in southwest Montana there, in that cutout. There we see the world's longest rivers. And importantly here, the Missouri River has been shortened substantially. Okay? And we can see here from Sioux City to St. Louis, about 75 miles of the Missouri have been removed, about 10% of its length. And so this is an example of what we did to the Missouri. And so this is a section in Iowa, and you can see there on the left, back in 1923, then in 1947, and then in 1976, how we channelized the Missouri for barging, mainly to get grain out of Iowa. Here's another section. You can see how it's been channelized and straightened in sections from 1923 to 1926. Here's another one here. And here, this is Missouri, and we can see the Missouri River there in the upper left in 1934, and you can make your way down to 1977, and you can see how we channelized. And so this has been an ecological disaster, and we know that this has caused the Missouri to erode downward. We've divorced it from its floodplain, and we separated it with the levee, and then we farmed the floodplain, right? And so, especially in Iowa, we have a lot of the Missouri River floodplain that's being farmed, and that's been indemnified by the taxpayer through construction of the levee system. Again, here's a slide from Missouri, and you can see what we've done. You can see the old natural channel there, and how we've channelized it in red, and how we've divorced it from the floodplain. And so this is, we've built the dams upstream in the Dakotas of Montana. This is in Montana for back, Gabbs Point, South Dakota. Another chart here showing the drop, vertical drop. And then, you know, to build the dams, we had to get some of the land away from the Native Americans that still retained it. And that was done with the Pick-Sloan Act in 1948, and you can see the Native American gentleman there, Asabi, who were having to cede the land to construct the dams out in South Dakota. And as I said, this has just been an ecological disaster. And I think everybody's probably heard of the wetlands eroding away down in Louisiana, and a lot of that is because we've cut off the sediment from the Missouri River. And so we see here the sediment loading to the Gulf of Mexico in the year 1800, and you can see where it's coming from. It's all coming from the Missouri, right? Here's another chart, 1800 there. This is the sediment loading in 1800, and then we fast forward to 1980. And so consequently, we've sequestered the sediment out there in the reservoirs, and then we've divorced the river from the floodplain, so the Missouri can't meander back and forth in the meander belt. And when it does that, it scours away material from the floodplain, and ultimately that's deposited down in Louisiana. Well, we've cut off that sediment source. And so now, here's what we call the bird foot, the outlet of the Mississippi. In 1937 on the left, and there it is in 2000. And so now we hear about when the hurricanes hit down there. You know, there's no buffering there from the wetlands because they've all been eroded away. And we converted the Missouri from a muddy water system to a clear water system. So the Missouri it did have a current of 3 miles an hour. Now it has a current of 6 miles an hour. It's a clear water system now. And now these species that evolved in a muddy water condition, like pallid sturgeon, they're endangered, right? And so we have to use taxpayer funds to try to save these things. Also, the birds have lost a lot of their floodplain habitat because of the channelization of the river, so we have a number of bird species that are threatened. And the other big thing this has done, it has destabilized the outlets of these tributaries. So especially in western Iowa, but I think down here in Missouri too. And so as the Missouri erodes downwind, what happens is that erosion starts heading upstream on these tributaries. And so we get these big head cuts. And we see this erosion, this epic level of erosion on these streams that has just happened over the span of a few decades because of the hydrological modification that we've done on the Missouri. So that's my last slide on Missouri, and I think, Doug wanted you guys to see these slides, but I think it's also informative to my point that we will go to no end here to support this production agriculture. We will modify one of the greatest rivers on earth, right? And just for all practical purposes, ruin it so we can farm the floodplain and presumably get up to Sioux City and get grain. But guess what? There's like 3 barges a year that go to Sioux City to get grain. And so we've created this whole shipping system on the Missouri River just so the barging on the Mississippi would have competition. Okay? So the bargers on the Mississippi know, well, if we raise our prices too high, the Missouri's always over there, and the farmers might choose to go over there. And so, what I really want to leave you with, this message, as you try to stave off the CAFOs down here and preserve your water quality, you will have to fight. You will have to fight tooth and nail, all right, for that to happen. And people tonight, just at dinner, were asking, well, is it hopeless? No, it's not hopeless. But just keep in mind, you're in for the fight of your lives to preserve your natural resources once the big livestock producers will. So, thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Chris. Does the Missouri, I've got a question, just a side question. Does Missouri have more water in it than the Mississippi at the confluence?
Does it what?
Does it have more water in it?
So, good question. And so, prior to European settlement, the Missouri did have more water. But now we suck so much out of it for irrigation that the Mississippi is now bigger at the confluence.
Cool, so it should be called the Missouri River all the way down to
Well, actually, it should be called
the Ohio. It always happens to me. It's usually my wife that's doing that to me. My name is Tim Gibbons. I'm with the Missouri Rural Crisis Center. As I said before, we're a statewide farm and rural membership organization. We started in 1985, sort of ad hoc out of the farm crisis of the 80s, farmers organizing to stay on the farm during a very challenging time. One organizing on the ground, like at auction, when farms are being auctioned off in courthouse steps, sit-ins, tractorcades, but also with the understanding that, you know, with grassroots organizing, we also need policy change. So we're grounded in that. And in 1987, they passed the 1987 Agriculture Credit Act, which allowed farmers to refinance their farms and stay on the farm. And thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of farmers are still on the farm because of that type of organizing that farmers were doing in the 80s. I just got back from DC on Wednesday. We were doing a fly-in talking about these issues. I'm not going to talk much about water, but just know that this is all connected very intimately. We brought farmers from Missouri, Iowa, Minnesota, South Dakota to talk to our congressional representatives about the issue of corporate industrial takeover, specifically of our livestock systems. Looking at the hog industry as an example and pushing for policies that support the continuation and sustainability of independent cattle production in our state. Missouri is the second largest cattle state in the country. We have the second largest number of operations. We've got just under 100,000 family farms in Missouri and just over 50,000 cattle operations. We're second only to Texas. So it's really important that we have policies that support farmers making money, staying on the land and passing this down to the next generation. One of the farmers that came with me, Darth Bentledge, is back there right now. He did a great job. In 1990, I was talking about hogs a little bit earlier. Lots of people used to raise hogs in Missouri in the 80s and 90s. And in 1993, MRCC started Patchwork Family Farms. It's an economic development project of the Missouri Rural Crisis Center. Our members who raise hogs came up with the idea because they saw the writing on the wall, what was happening to the hog market, that it was being industrialized, corporatized, and taken from them. At the same time, and unfortunately they were right. In 1985, Missouri had 23,000 hog producers, a lot in the southern part of the state as well, and I think right around central southern part of Missouri used to be called the feeder hog capital of the world. We started Patchwork because we saw that that was happening. At the same time, we were also organizing for policies, so we were specifically organizing and asking for policies from then President Clinton and Secretary of Agriculture Glickman to have them stop packers from being able to own livestock, enforcing antitrust laws, stop the use of captive supply agreements for corporations to be able to manipulate the market, stop the intentional overproduction of hogs, which is what they do in order to keep the price down, the price paid to farmers down, not the price paid by consumers. And then they overproduce and then they vertically integrate. They control multiple parts of the supply chain. And they can make money off multiple parts of the supply chain. What that allows them to do is pay producers less, charge consumers more. What's the result of this? Right now, for multinational corporations control over 70% of the entire U.S. pork market, and 50% of the U.S. pork market is controlled by two foreign multinational corporations. JBS based out of Brazil and Smithfield based out of China. And what really makes it even more ghastly is that they did it by using billions of our taxpayer dollars, quite literally billions, and I'll just give a few examples. One is a conservation program that is administered through USDA called the Environmental Quality Incentives Program. It's a working lands cost share program for farmers. And it started in 1996 in the 1996 Farm Bill. It wasn't opened up to CAFOs, and the cost share cap was $50,000. It's a good program. In the 2002 Farm Bill, they raised the cost share cap from $50,000 to $450,000, and they opened it up to CAFOs for us paying to manage their manure for concentrated animal feeding operations. It's one strategy they use, using conservation dollars to build concentrated animal feeding operation, which is crazy because factory farms are not conservation. They also use the guarantee loan process through the Farm Service Agency. For example, you want to build a 10,000 head JBS style operation. You go to your bank. Prices are volatile or volatilely low. The bank's not going to give you a loan on that. You go to FSA, you get a guarantee by the taxpayer, and you go back to that bank, there's a lot less liability for the bank to give that loan. And that just increases more production, mostly from export markets, but then also increased production drives down prices, so what it does is it allows them to take over the marketplace. There's a lot of other government policies, government procurement through the Agriculture Marketing Service, the globalization of trade and our trade agreements, the land-grant universities who are being underfunded and having to go get private money in order to do research with public money at the expense of the public and farmers for the benefit of private gain. And no matter what the corporate dominant narrative continually tells us and jams down our throats, and I read it every day, this did not happen out of inevitability. It did not happen because of efficiency. It happened because of calculated policy decisions at the state, federal, and international levels, heavily and unfairly influenced by corporate special interests, corporate lobbyists, and campaign contributions. So that's sort of the bad side. There's a good side. It's hard to believe. There are a few good things that our federal government is doing right now. In July of 2021, President Biden signed an executive order on competition. A lot of industries that it's dealing with. Agriculture is one of them. Hearing aids, airlines, railroads, a lot of different industries that have been vertically integrated and concentrated. But it deals with agriculture. And from that executive order, they had a rulemaking period to close a loophole that allows meat packers to import boxed beef from other countries, repackage it, and label it as a product of the United States. They are closing that loophole. They are strengthening the Packers and Stockyards Act, which it was passed in 1921, seldom used, not enforced well, but it needs to be stronger. It's antitrust within agriculture and food production. And the Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission just passed new draft guidelines on what type of scrutiny the government can have when they're going through the merger process. There's one major merger. We talk about farm and agriculture, we don't talk about retail a lot, but there's a major merger that's being proposed right now. Albertsons and Kroger are trying to merge so that they can compete with Costco and Walmart. But that further monopolization also creates what's called monoscopy. So monopoly is production power, monoscopy is buyer power. You know, these retailers have this monopolistic buyer power, and that drives prices down to producers and drives prices up for consumers. Right now, when we are in DC, you know, it's a farm bill year. It was a farm bill year. That's funny because that's just funny to me. They just passed a continuing resolution to extend the farm bill for another year. It ended at the end of September. In the continuing resolution, they did an extension of the farm bill. But we're demanding some policies to support family farm livestock production and to oppose corporate and foreign multinational livestock production. Family farm livestock production are farmers on the land, being stewards of the land, protecting our water and air, sequestering carbon. Corporate control of livestock is the exact opposite. It's dirty water, farmers getting paid less, our rural communities being driven out, extraction of wealth. And just a few of those things are, we need to stop subsidizing factory farms, we need to break up the meatpacking giants, we need to restore competition in livestock industries, we need to modernize our form of our grain production so that we have a grain reserve, so that we can stop the volatility within grain markets. It also allows farmers to get paid from the market instead of from the government, and prioritize better production and more local meat packing. So with that, I can talk for hours. I'm going to stop now and hand the microphone over to Jess Piper, but I just want to say I appreciate you listening to me. I'm doing my best, and I think we all are.
So what am I doing here? I'm the odd woman out. I am not a chemist. I'm not a farm where I am. But I come from Northwest Missouri, and I come from CAFO country. And like Chris, I am the canary that has flown out of the coal mine to tell you not to do this. Don't do this. You don't want to do this. But really, I'm here to talk about rural communities, rural folks, and what's going on, because all of this is intertwined. Everything is intertwined in what we're talking about. Rural communities are dying. My part of the state contracts. Every time we take a census, there are fewer and fewer people in the 6th district up in Northwest Missouri. I'm from a town of 480 people. It was 525, and it was 650 before that, and it was 900 before that. And we don't build things anymore. We knock buildings down because no one is using them. There are 3 places for me to buy a pack of cigarettes, not 1 place for me to buy a gallon of milk. Okay? So we have what's left, and that's my passion. We still have community schools. We still have local schools, public schools. And that trend is what the Missouri legislators are coming after right now. That is the big push right now. And when they finally manage to take that away from us, rural Missouri is gone. That's all we have left. It is the epicenter of our towns. It's where we vote. It's where we go every Friday night to watch a football game. It's where we go every time that we're, baseball, basketball. It's where we go to concerts. It's all of us showing up for Thanksgiving dinner with our kids, right? This is the epicenter. And when they move us out and move the CAFOs in and poison the water, poison the air, rural Missouri is gone. I'm going to tell you why I ran. Now, these men up here aren't necessarily partisan. I am. I'm a partisan person. And it's because I've been watching what's going on, because I paid attention, and I can't help it at this point, right? We live under a supermajority. In 2019, we passed a ban for health care, and it infuriated me. I was very upset about it. But nothing happened until I opened up my local newspaper and I saw that my representative had written a letter in there, and he was very happy about taking health care away from about 50% of the population. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna call him. And he didn't call me back. So I said, well, I'm gonna talk to him on Facebook. He didn't care. I'm gonna post about him on Twitter. He doesn't care. I'm gonna write him a real letter. He doesn't care. I'm going to out myself and write an op-ed in my tiny little paper. That's what I'm going to do. And you know what? He still didn't care. And I never heard from him. And this happens a lot, but this one was infuriating to me, this one. So I was sitting, and I apologize if you've heard this story before, but it's very important for you to understand what it's like for the other half in Missouri. I was sitting on the couch one day, and I turned to my husband. I said, you call Alan. And my husband said, I don't want to call Alan. And I said, well, I need you to call him. I need you to tell him how you feel, since he doesn't care how I feel. So my husband called, and he left a message with the legislative aid, just like I did, and I knew he would get the same result, except he didn't, friends. Except Alan called him 20 minutes later. He called my husband, and my husband was like, well, this is how I feel, but what I really want you to do is call my wife. And so we did. Alan called me, and I lit into him. I mean, I lit. I was angry. And Alan told me this, ma'am, I don't have to talk to you, and I'm calling you out of a favor to your husband. And I think I probably passed out. I woke up a few moments later, but that enraged me. And then in 2020, I went to vote, and there was only one choice on there, all the way up the ballot. And I'd had enough, because I see what's happening to my community under a supermajority. And let me tell you this truly, a supermajority of either party isn't democracy. You don't have any dissent. You have no other voices. And so that's what we're dealing with here. And we're dealing with people who don't have opposition, so they don't have to call you back because there is no one running against them. Last year in Missouri, 40% of the seats went uncontested. That means 66 representatives walked down to Jeff City without ever having a job interview. It means they don't have to talk to you if they don't want to. It means if a CAFO comes to your area, who cares? They don't care. You have to get a group together. You have to be loud. You have to be able to say, I'm going to do something else about this. But I'm going to talk for just a second about our schools, because this is a very important part of what is happening in rural America. We already have a voucher scheme, or an ESA scheme in Missouri. We are already siphoning $25 million from public schools into private and religious schools. It's not working though, because in Missouri you have to have a donor. A donor will give their money and they get a tax dollar for dollar credit. It's kind of like, it looks like a tax shelter. I don't know, I'm not an accountant, but it seems like one. But they get a dollar for dollar credit. Well, guess what? They don't have enough donors. So last session, we had a representative say, it's not working, we're gonna go with full force vouchers. And that just means they are going to use the state budget to take money from public schools and send it to private and religious schools. And I'll tell you this, people always tell me about market solution, right? The market will take care of it. Who's coming to my town? I can't buy a gallon of milk. Who's coming to my town to build a school for 200 kids? No one. No one is coming. So what happens to my kid's school? It closes or consolidated. And then my child has an hour one-way bus trip every single day, right? And we've seen this coming, friends, because my daughter graduated from a 4-day school week. Lathrop, Missouri went to a 4-day school week almost 2 decades ago. How long have they been doing this? 2 decades. How long they've been in power? 2 decades, right? They're using everything they can to come after our schools. We had some bad scores come out last year, and there's problems with the test, right? But the scores weren't great. And you know what? A certain party grabbed that score and ran in front of a camera as fast as they could and said, see, we told you, Missouri schools suck. And this is proof of why we need vouchers. Well, I'll tell you this, who was in charge of Missouri schools for 2 decades, right? Who was in charge? You were. You defunded it. You came after our towns. You put CAFOs in here. You don't care about our water. And that's, friends, why I'm partisan. And I'll leave you with one other thing. This galled me to no end. I don't know if you follow me on social media, and I'm sorry if you do, because I have the worst trolls on the planet. These fellas found out, they tried to tweet with my name in it, and they were like, oh my God. I don't care. I don't care. What are you going to do? Defund my school? I don't care. Come after me. But there's a lady named Jean Evans who was a Missouri legislator, and now she works for Betsy DeVos's organization in Missouri that's called the Federation for Children. And Jean often likes to tell me that school choice is going to work in Missouri and all these things. Well, I went to the mailbox the other day and I pulled out a letter from my local school, and it said they had tested the water and one of the faucets had 4 times the amount of lead as what should be in there. And the school's mitigating it. They're trying to work with it. But 80%, Missouri Independent did a story on this, 80% of the kids in Missouri test positive for lead in the blood. And there is no safe level of lead in your blood. 60% Kansas. I don't know about Iowa. But long story short, I put this on social media, and I said this is the thing that we need to be talking about. Children shouldn't be drinking lead. And that lady that is siphoning public funds to private schools said this to me. If you would allow school choice to come into Missouri, your daughter could drink clean water. They say the quiet part out loud. Friends, they don't care. And that's what we're fighting about. And what Chris is talking about happened in Iowa. The same thing is going to happen here unless we stand up and we talk back. And every single one of you in here deserves better than that. And so do your kids and your grandkids, right? I appreciate your time.
That's a hard act to follow. So most of you, or many of you probably know me. Curtis Millsap, born and raised here in Springfield. Born and raised in Springfield. That's a key part of this. And but I lived on the rivers and the woods and the Ozarks, right? And that's what a lot of us find value in. And so as I turned into a young adult and thought about what I was going to do with my time, I thought, well, I want to be outside, and I want to be surrounded by people that I enjoy spending time with, and I want to raise my kids along my side. And so what ended up happening, long story short, is we ended up on 20 acres, 4 miles north of town here, and raising vegetables and flowers. Now, what I like to say is that there's a lot of bad news in the world, and there's a lot of Goliaths, but there's also a lot of little stories that are gradually making a difference. You know, I'm an organic farmer, and we don't have silver bullets. It's one of the rules of really farming as a whole. The conventional farmers still like to pretend like they have silver bullets, right? But we all know there's no such thing as a silver bullet. What we do have is little silver hammers to just tap things a little at a time, right? So when I want to get rid of caterpillars, well, I've got like 4 or 5 things I can do, right? I can tap it just a little bit in one direction. And I think there's a lot of wisdom that comes in that. And there's a lot of wisdom in understanding that we're never going to solve this. And I mean, you've just heard this. We're never going to solve these problems with one big overarching problem. It won't matter. I mean, it wouldn't matter if tomorrow we elected a supermajority of Democrats. It will change things, but it won't fix the problems all across the board. And because I agree completely, I mean, supermajority on either side is a problem. And I'm not partisan, but I do see that much. We have a democracy. If we don't lose our dialogue, that's the problem. So what have I learned from farming for 16 years? Well, one of the things I've learned is that small actions matter, right? They aren't the whole thing, but every time that somebody chooses to buy food that was produced in a way that was better than what we're describing here, you know, that honored the virtue of clean water, that honored biodiversity, that sequestered carbon, then they are tapping that little silver hammer, right? All my customers, when they say, hey, I'm going to choose grass-fed beef over CAFO feedlot beef. Yeah, we all grew up with corn-fed beef. That's what our taste buds are adapted to. That's what we think we like. But, you know, 10,000 years of humans ate bovine without corn in it, we'll probably survive. And not just that, we didn't learn that actually it's better for us, it's better for the environment, it's better for all kinds of things, right? So there's a little tap. We say, okay, we can buy a little more of this. That says for farmers, okay, there's a market. I can grow a little more of that. I don't have to be focused on feeding corn to cattle. And most of you probably know this already, but that's a stupid idea. You know, cows are made to eat grass. I mean, they've been doing it since the very beginning. They were the original omnivores, right? I mean, herbivores. They are designed to eat grass. We feed them corn. That's a stupid thing to do. It makes them sick. It makes us sick. It fouls the environment. Now, let's talk a little bit about what we're doing in terms of food supply. So my farm is 25 acres. I have 2.5 acres in vegetables and cut flowers. And on that 2.5 acres, I feed about 2,000 people. Now that's an estimate, you know, so it could be a little more, it could be a little less. And I don't feed them all their calories, I'm very aware of that, right? But I feed them most of their vegetable diet, about 2,000 people. That's a lot of people to feed on 2.5 acres, right? So when somebody says, this is a favorite straw man, and I'm gonna address it right away, because I think, you know, the big question is always, well, can farmers like yours really feed the world? Well, first off, it's all that ever has, okay? What's happening in Iowa, what's happening in northern Missouri is not feeding the world. It's feeding American pork, it's feeding China pork, but it's also, over half of our corn now is going to ethanol. And most of the other half is going to feed pigs and chickens and cows. Well, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, what, you know, there's grass feeds cows. Chicken used to be a luxury item until we subsidized corn and grain so heavily that it became cheap and vertically integrated, and Tyson, you know, figured out, hey, we can do this cheaper. Well, okay, it's going to cost everybody else something, but it won't cost us anything, right? So that's what we're seeing. So there's one example of a way that we, as we shift our paradigm toward grass-fed beef, and we start looking around the Ozarks, man, do we grow grass like we were made to do it, or what? We have beautiful rolling pasture lands, right? And we've learned, by the way, with a little bit of new technology, this is cool, this is one of the things I love about new farming, modern farming, is we're not stuck in the past. You know, most of us, we grew up with parents, grandparents, somebody who were raised on the farm, and it was hard work, and it was often underpaid, and it was all very much underappreciated. But even when you talk to the people who had a rough go of it, and they look back at their farm life, farm childhood, in my case, being a grandchild on the farm, I have very good memories of that space. I have very good memories of the way I interacted with the land, my family, and all that. And part of that was because we recognized what our land was good for and what we could do with it. Sorry, back to the technology thing. So one of the things our land does so well is grow grass, which feeds cows. But we've learned that by the use of a little bit of electric fencing, which by the way is super cheap now, super effective, and super easy to use, we can do way more than we used to do. And what we're doing, in fact, is we're not just taking a step forward, we're also looking back, and we're saying, you know how the buffalo tended however many millions of acres of prairie that built how many billions of tons of carbon into our soil? I mean, we're still strip mining the carbon out of that soil. That's what's going on in Iowa, right? That's what's going on in Nebraska. That's what's going on in South Dakota. We are strip mining thousands of centuries of carbon out of that soil, and we're turning it into grain, which we're feeding to cows, and chickens, and pigs, and then we're flushing it into our rivers. Instead, what used to happen was the buffalo moved around in tight little pods, and they built the soil rather than degraded it. That's what good farming does. That's what good farming has always done, and that's what good farming is doing now. So you've got these what we call managed intensive grazing farms, where they're taking very large numbers of cows per acre. They're moving around very intensively, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. They're creating a very high product beef product. They're building soil. They're building biodiversity, by the way, because the cows aren't roaming the whole land all the time, consuming all the things that they like to eat and leaving behind the ones they wouldn't. So they're creating biodiversity and better landscapes, cleaner water, deeper soils, capturing carbon. It's all there, right? And how does this happen? Well, this happens again. Our little silver hammers, us saying, I'd prefer to eat grass-fed beef. I'd prefer to eat grass-fed beef because it doesn't kill me, doesn't kill the environment, doesn't dirty the farm. In my case, I'm a vegetable and flower grower, right? And so the same principles apply. What I do is I look and I say, how has it been done for thousands of years before me? Before there were synthetic fertilizers, before people could till the land from one fence line to the other and let it all wash into the river. Well, the way it was done was with careful management, careful stewardship, looking at every square foot of land as a valuable resource to be stewarded and built over time, adding organic matter, adding biodiversity, creating just the right system to produce the best outcomes in terms of food production, but also income for farmers, healthy lifestyles for those people involved, healthy food for their communities. Because I can tell you that those 2,000 people, I care about, and they care about me. I don't think that's true for JBS. I don't think they give a shit, frankly. Well, they do. Actually, that's exactly what they're giving. That's kind of the problem, isn't it? But they, and that's a scale problem. So again, tiny little silver hammer, connect with a farmer. Find out who's growing your food. Can you know who's growing your coffee? I don't know. That's a high standard. Can you know who's growing your carrots? Why not? Absolutely, right? I grow carrots. You can know me. I have 100 friends who grow carrots. You can know us. And you can ask those questions. Hey, what have you done to build biodiversity? What have you done to build ecology? So, the big question, can this be done? The big answer is absolutely. It's being done. It's happening right here at the ground level. It's happening on my farm. It's happening on hundreds of farms around the country, thousands of farms around the country. Policy supports it in some ways, it degrades it in others, but you know what? We're still doing the work. We're still pushing the ball up the hill. So there you go. It can be done, and it will continue to be done, even if the whole world seems against us, because some of us are just wired up this way. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Curtis, Chris, and Jess. I'm going to introduce right now Ethan Newt and some music. Ethan's with the Missouri River Bird Observatory. Ashlyn's with the Socially Responsible Agriculture Project. They're going to present the new Missouri watershed map that was created by MRBO, Missouri Coalition for the Environment, and Water Keepers. And if I forgot anything, please.
Yeah, hi everybody, my name is Ashlyn Busick, and like Tim said, I'm with the Socially Responsible Agriculture Project. I just wanted to gauge really quickly, how many of you are willing to say that you're maybe a little bit newer to this idea of water quality and being concerned about water quality? Anybody willing to say that? Yeah, some of you, thank you so much for being here. Who's been in this for a long time? Yeah, thank you all. I just wanted to acknowledge that Missouri residents have a long history of coming together to support each other, support family farms, and protect water and air quality. So for those of you who aren't new, know that you're stepping into a very proud history, some of which Tim talked about already. But this is a collaboration of several of those groups who have been around for a while, we know there's still quite a bit of education that needs done, right? We need to help people understand what it means to live in a watershed and the impacts of different kinds of raisins being spread in those watersheds. So as Tim said, we call this the Waste Sheds of Missouri. And if you want to look into this more, this actually lives on Missouri Coalition for the Environment's website. They have a full story map that talks more about land use and waste application in Missouri's watershed. I'll take the pass over.
That's great, Ashley. Yes, and I appreciate the agricultural folks that are collaborative of people to help make this happen. Missouri Waterkeepers, another group, and Missouri Coalition for the Environment has been excellent. I like this map. I like putting work into this because I do a lot of science and mapping stuff. How many of you are into science? Are you excited about science? Cool. How many are into conservation? Awesome, awesome. So this is a map here that really helps show what everybody has spoken up here about. You talked about a system that isn't working anymore. It's failing schools, it's failing the healthy environment, it's failing people. This map here helps show that failure in a bit because it's showing what we call externalized costs. And who's paying for this? It's the people that live in these landscapes they're paying for. Somebody's profiting, but they're not paying what they need to pay for to do that. But this is status quo just isn't really truly profitable, and it's costing our human health too. But I'm into birds, right? I'm from the Missouri River Bird Observatory. My wife and I there co-founded it, and we've noticed that there's been some declines in birds. And then recently, the paper came out in 2019, and we've lost 3 billion birds. So we started looking into this, and why has this happened? The system has failed. People ask us all the time, what happened to quail? Where's the quail? Ever hear that? Oh, I don't hear the whippoorwills anymore. What happened to that? And they have their hot takes on it. You know, they'll say it's this, it's the predator's this, you know, they never read the info. But they'll say this, and then I'll say, well, Missouri used to have like 12 or 13 million acres of native tall grass spring. You know, we've got 68,000 left. So less than 1/2 of 1% of that is left. It's math. It's simple. It's bad land use. We can't extract that much from the land. And now we're learning what we can't put into it anymore. So, yeah, I think we've been duped in the past, and it's about time we're done being duped. You know, our conservation community's been duped. We almost got completely duped by the renewable fuel standard. That was sold as this great solution. And now we found out it's worse for climate change. Well, that whole cycle, that same thing, just like big tobacco did. They're trying to dupe us again. We can't be duped, and we have to hold our elected officials accountable. This map is a great resource because science is easier now. Math is easier now. We can communicate. We have the tools to show what's happening. This isn't politics. This is what the land can sustain and what it can't sustain. We've got the facts behind us, and now it's time to move forward on it. Any questions about it? We'll be in the back.
I'd like to say one thing.
Sorry?
I forgot to say that this is actually the brainchild of an amazing water quality advocate, Jeannie Hoyser, who I'm sure some of you in the audience know.
Thank you, Ashlyn and Ethan. Have people been handing questions to people walking around? Do people have questions that they have on cards that we could, there's one right there. Dana's going to be walking around. Oh, you're double dipping. What states have effectively regulated CAFOs?
Well, the livestock industry claims they're regulated because if they have, I believe, over 1,000 animal units, then they're required to register as a point source discharger. But if they say we're not discharging anything, then that is never enforced. And so, to my knowledge, no state's really regulated it, but we've had states that have sort of done this race to the bottom in terms of the permitting process. And of course, Iowa won that race, and we got to the bottom first. And Minnesota also got in on it, and now Missouri is wanting to get in on that race to the bottom as well, with the loss of the local control. And so, you know, the real issue here is, can they get the construction permits? Okay, that's the issue. And so, when we lost local control in Iowa, it prevented the counties from essentially zoning for livestock production. And so as a consequence, then, we wrote a statewide rule that the livestock industry basically wrote, and made it impossible to deny these construction permits. And so we have some states that have, you know, signed up for that race to the bottom. I named most of them there. But has any state really effectively regulated livestock? Not really that I know.
And I can talk a lot about local control. MRCC has been fighting the taking of local control since the early 2000s. And what local control is important just in itself, but when you go to the Capitol building in Jefferson City, they make it sound like the sky's falling is local control. What local control is having local people, local county commissioners generally, create additional setbacks. Setbacks from the CAFO to people's houses. Setbacks from the waste application, from people's personal property, from farms that have been there for generations, from water sources. That's pretty much it. There's bonding in there too. So it's making these CAFOs accountable a little bit to the people that live there. Also, another thing that if you ever hear this in the state capitol, the words, "we're just coming in line with federal regulations." What that means is exactly what Chris just said. It's a race to the bottom. So the feds create a baseline of regs for CAFOs, and then states are supposed to build upon it based upon their local geography, who they are, you know, what type of livestock they have. Well, what they do at the state capitol is they say we're coming in line with federal regulations, and that means getting rid of all the additional protections at the state level that protect our farms, our property values, our water, our air, everything, our families, our kids, everything that we value. And one major issue is too, the more power they get over the market, and they've got a lot of power over the market now, the more power they have over our democratic process. And that's one of the reasons I'm still doing this work, is because I'm pissed, is because our democratic process is being controlled by corporate interests. It's not being controlled by people. It's not being controlled by our interests. It's being controlled by corporate interests. We are fighting still for democracy. We're not fighting to not lose democracy. We're fighting for democracy. And these are all the issues that we just do it through the food and agriculture lens, but I think everybody's been talking about it pretty well, about what the problems are. I don't understand this question, just because it's long and maybe it's my brain, but I'll just read it out loud. How does a community get the DNR, the Department of Natural Resources, who is the agency within Missouri that enforces the Clean Water Act, to enforce when a company of a slaughterhouse doesn't have a permit? The DNR is using their enforcement discretion, which seems like an excuse to allow pollution of a small community. I don't really get that question. I think that there is issues with the taking of local control. Also has to do with all agriculture and things that are connected to agriculture. And like Chris said, the DNR says that they have to permit them if it falls within these small few things that they write in their permit. Did I understand that question correctly? Okay, cool.
So I think if I'm not mistaken, we're talking about the place in Pleasant Hill, right? Yeah, okay, good. So, yeah, and I have a very imperfect understanding of this, and so I'm sure there are people in the room who are much more educated about it than I am. But fundamentally, the problem is, it's the classic thing of like closing the gate after the cow's out, right? So once an entity is operating and has a permit to do something with the waste, then even when that permit changes or sunsets and they have to renew that permit, in this case they've applied for a different type of permit, so they had a ground application permit for, I don't remember the quantity, but it was a lot of industrial waste, and they didn't have enough acreage to do that, right? But DNR has granted them several grace periods to come up with an alternative option, and they have failed to do that so far. I think the answer, in short, is pressure does work. So we have to keep calling DNR, we have to keep calling legislators, and granted, they won't always answer the phone, but sometimes they will. Maybe a couple of them. Maybe another very important, powerful tool that may not be directly related to your question, but one that we've been made aware of by the Ozark Society in Northwest Arkansas. I've had a lot of success in the last decade fighting what we would call industrial waste distribution, what they would call manure spreading, right? But it's reaching out to the end users of this product. So we've learned, for example, there are several fast food chains that are using that beef from Missouri meat packers. And so if you reach out to those people and say, well, you know, McDonald's, I don't know if McDonald's is one, but for example, you reach out to corporate McDonald's or even local stores and say, why is your McDonald's, your local store here, buying beef from a factory that is polluting the streams of the Ozarks? Don't you care? You know, and maybe that letter also goes to the editor, right? Maybe that letter also gets up on Facebook. That, they've had success with that. Now, we haven't tried that yet, and we're hopeful this process does seem to be moving in our favor in this one instance. But that's another tool that I think we need to bear in mind is market pressure does work if it's brought to bear in the right place at the right time, you know, in the proper quantity. So.
Thank you, Curtis. Chris, Missouri taxpayers maintain a great system of public lands. You often talk about the value of public lands and lament the lack of public lands in Iowa. Would you please elaborate?
So I think, you know, a lot of you folks probably don't know how good you have it here in terms of your public lands. Iowa's the second worst state in the country for the percentage of our land that's in public hands. And so all of our state parks in aggregate, all of them, would fit within the city of Des Moines. And so it's really a travesty that we don't have places in Iowa where we can enjoy nature. Okay? And, you know, in here in Missouri, there's really, from my estimation, an abundance of public land. And I think, you know, in Iowa, where everything is farmed, everything that can be farmed, it is farmed. We don't have these natural areas that sort of buffer the effects of farming. And so when you think of farming 80 years ago, well, you know, it wasn't just all corn and soybeans like it is now in Iowa. We had wood lots, we had orchards, we had small grains and other things. And this diversity on the landscape buffers the, in my view, the consequences of the corn and soybean production. And so when we don't have these natural areas, it really enhances the negative effect of production agriculture.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Calls to action, and I'll direct this to Jess. What can people do as individuals as well as part of a collective to move the needle on clean water and I think representative democracy is what I would argue as well.
Talk back. Talk to folks. Call your representatives. If you can run for something, run for something. Write letters to the editor. Find a candidate, a nominee that you believe in. Write postcards for them. Open up your wallet. Sometimes you have to budget for democracy, right? Send somebody a few dollars so that they can work on your behalf. All of these things. And then, of course, you've got, you know, organizing, which I've done for a really long time. And if you're in a rural area, I'm going to tell you, it's not the easiest thing to do. And you are really asking folks to step outside of their comfort zone, even if it is something, even if it is clean water. Because some people will say, well, you're a tree hugger, aren't you? Right? You're some kind of hippie or something, aren't you? Next, you're going to have blue hair, right? I mean, that blue hair freaks them out. But anyway, these are the things that you can do, is find somebody that you believe in and you support. And if you can't find somebody, then, you know, start writing. Do something. Move your feet. Talk back.
Thank you, Jess. And join organizations that are fighting with you. Chris, people don't know how our tax dollars indemnify building CAFO barns and lagoons are paying for crop insurance. Please talk about how our tax dollars pay for the industrial agricultural practices.
Well, the thing we forget about a lot of times is we subsidize and indemnify the feed, right? And so the main subsidy program in the Corn Belt now is taxpayer assisted crop insurance. And so some producers pay as little as 30% for their crop insurance. And so that's the main subsidy program. And crop insurance not only can you insure the crop against weather calamity, you can also insure your profit. Okay, a lot of the taxpayers don't know this through the PLC program. And so farmers have a choice. They can insure the crop against weather calamity, or they can insure their profit. And so right from the get-go, we subsidize the livestock industry by subsidizing the stuff that the livestock eat. Okay? And so if we looked at the system as a whole, and as Curtis said, described, if we designed a system around environmental outcomes and human nutrition, maybe we would have one that produced things that were for the common good, right? Instead, we have a system that's designed for commerce. Okay? We have a system that's designed for commerce. And so part of that exists because we subsidize the production system. And again, remember, in terms of livestock, subsidizing the grain production is subsidizing the livestock industry.
And MRCC has an opinion on this too. We believe in supply management. We believe in price floors and price ceilings. Like Chris said, the beneficiary of below cost of production feed, overproduced below cost of production grains and feed is the factory farm industry, the processing industry, the ethanol industry. So instead, what we need to do is create a system where the buyers of these products are actually at least paying the cost of production. So that's why you make the floor price the cost of production. And then you make a ceiling price. And then you have a grain reserve. And when the floor price, when it goes down below the floor price, you take grain off the market and put it in the reserve. And when the price goes up above the ceiling price, you put it into the market, which will create more supply, which will drive the price down. So it takes the volatility out of the marketplace, it makes farmers more whole, and it requires, one farmer member of mine says, Tim, I'm just a mailbox watcher, because he gets his check oftentimes from the mail, from insurance, government-sponsored insurance programs. He would rather be making his money from the market and seeing factory farm corporations pay at least the cost of production. We would argue a living wage on top of that. Yes, please, and I got a question for you too, so maybe we can just flow into this too. What steps can be taken to encourage, and this sort of flows into this, intellectual curiosity, keep going over that, at college, university levels, and identify more solutions for clean water, clean soil, clean air?
So, yeah, this does flow really well, because, so here's one more little place I'll point that unknowingly we're propping up the industrial system. So anybody ever eat a school lunch in the last 20 years? I mean, they have not improved, right? And that's true across all the commodity-based food systems. So, school lunches are a heavily subsidized government program, but that program has been skewed very hard into large-scale commodity production, purchases of those at very discounted prices, and then our kids are eating things that are used to maybe be cheese at one time, and I'm not sure that the chicken ever was, but in theory, maybe, right? Where is that going? Well, one, that's a really messed up way to spend our tax dollars, right? To feed our kids poison. Let's just acknowledge that. Secondly, we see the same thing in that mentality. If you train somebody to eat chicken with nuggets and call ketchup a vegetable, and and then I don't know if you guys really, if you haven't been to a school cafeteria in the last 10 years, you need to go see it. It has shifted from when we were in school. Okay, there are things on that menu that you would never have thought belonged on a kid's diet. But there's high fructose corn syrup, a mainstay, all this very processed food. Well, what do you expect then? You raise kids on this, So that's what food is. And now you get young adults who go, well, that's what food is. I'm going to eat it. Now, not to pick on anybody, but you know, every fast food restaurant, frankly, most of the not fast food restaurants, right? Most of them are pulling stuff out of frozen bags and dumping it in the fryer, cranking out the front door and going home cooking. So how do we foster? I think it starts right there. I think it starts with school programs that bring kids out into gardens. So for many years, I had one of these at Pleasant View Elementary. It was a great program. It was a challenge every year to convince administrators that it mattered. But what we did, we had two fourth grade classes at Pleasant View Elementary and 2 kindergarten classes. So one week, one of the fourth grade classes would come out and work with me in the kitchen, in the garden. And we grow stuff. We grow all winter long because, you know, it's the Ozarks. This is what our weather is like, right? So we can grow things like spinach, and celery, and chard, and carrots all through the winter. And we would grow, we'd haul compost. They love to shovel compost, right? And then we would harvest some of that stuff. At the same time, I had a good friend who's a chef, and he would come in and he'd go into the home ec lab, which, by the way, was no longer used because we're not teaching kids to cook anymore. They don't need that, right? We can pull it out of the box now. But he'd go into that vacant home ec lab, which was handy as vacant, and take those the other class fourth graders, and he would teach them principles of food, taste, nutrition, and he would help them prep a meal. It'd be a representative meal. He'd have some salad, he'd have some sort of savory something, and he'd pickle some radishes or something, right? Then that second week, we would swap. Well, we would start the same way, and then we would come together, and the kids in the kitchen would present what they had prepared to the other half of the class. You talk about a paradigm-shifting concept. What? This stuff that we're growing in the dirt can be prepared into this kind of food? Because it turns out that if you're the one who roasted those carrots, you like those carrots. And if you're the one who harvested those radishes, by golly, you're going to get them down one way or the other, right? And I've never liked Swiss chard, but these kids would eat it like candy because, man, they had grown this stuff. And so I think that's part of it. I think we start very, very young. I think we need kids to get out. They need to be outside, but more importantly, they need to get their hands in the dirt. They need to understand where food comes from. And then the second piece I'll offer is they need to be out on working farms as well. And so we host a lot of farm tours, but we host a fraction of the farm tours that ought to be happening. I mean, we should have thousands of kids come through my farm gate every year. And frankly, that should be compensated. I should get paid for hosting a few thousand kids. I hate to be selfish, but you know, it's easy to measure things in green stuff. It'd be nice if there was a little extra at the end of the year. So getting kids out on those farms, walking them around, helping them see farming as a valid way to make a living, as a valid calling, and as something noble and useful, right? Kids are into it. Man, I very rarely met a kid that came out to the farm who, when I said, hey, anybody think farming would be a cool way to earn a living? Yeah, that's how play out here all day, dig the carrots, you know, even weed the potatoes. So I think that's our key. I think that's our starting point. And then because as they grow up, as they've eaten more chicken nuggets and they spend more time in front of screens and they've spent all these litany of problems we can name off, there's less and less intellectual curiosity about the whole world, but certainly about the environment. So that would be my offering is let's get them in young, let's get them out there on the ground. Let's bring the kids, bring your grandkids out to my farm or any other small farm out there. Just let them get a taste of what it means.
You're here.
Can I just speak on that
Totally.
for a second? I want to expand this just a minute because, like I said, everything's intertwined. Why are kids eating crap in school? Because the schools are defunded. Because we don't have lunch ladies anymore, cafeteria workers, because we used to have 7 women and they'd make a pot of chili and a pan of cornbread and something sweet and hand it out to kids. And now we take packages. They are in packages. There aren't ovens in a lot of schools. They are unwrapping things and putting them in the microwave and handing it to children. So when we say this is intertwined, this is what's happening and why, that is why. Those kids deserve healthy food, but 2 people serving 400 kids, it's not happening. They're unwrapping it and sending it out the door.
Thank you. Chris, I've heard about the value and reliability of waste management plans. They say every farm or land applying waste spreads exactly how much the plan says the plants need. Please talk about applying more nutrients than plants can uptake.
So when a farmer gets a construction permit in Iowa for a CAFO, they're required to put together a manure management plan. And so that identifies the fields that are going to receive the manure and the rate at which it's going to be applied. But as an example about the industry wrote the law, the formula that we use in Iowa is based on what's called the yield goal. And that was a guy from the University of Illinois derived that. His name is George Sanford. He was a graduate of Iowa State. And what it says is, it goes like this. If you think you can produce 200 bushel of corn on this acre, then the amount of nitrogen you need is 200 times 1.2. So that's 240. So that means put 240 pounds of nitrogen on that acre to get that 200 bushel. And so we know that strategy is bad. It was discredited 30 years ago, both from an environmental protection perspective and from an agronomic perspective. And so we know it's wrong. But that is what our law is based on in Iowa. And so our state law endorses an over-application of nutrients to farmed fields. Along with that, we know that farmers that are in livestock-dense watersheds buy almost as much commercial fertilizer as farmers that don't have access to it. And so we see that farmers, like I always say, if beer was free, I'd drink more of it. And so farmers, the manure is free to them, and so they naturally use more nutrients. And so we have livestock that are so densely packed into some of these watersheds that it becomes a waste management issue and not really a fertility issue. And so I would say in Iowa, these manure management plans are just worthless from my perspective.
Thank God beer isn't free. I just want to say this out loud. We need more livestock on the ground, and we need less corn and beans. We need more cattle producers out here raising cattle on the ground. We need more hog producers out here producing hogs independently. Why do we feed the world thinking that we can... Feeding the world based upon the corporate model is putting farmers out of business, both here and around the world. That doesn't make any sense. This question is to me, and I'll answer it right quick. If the FTC and DOJ successfully strengthened antitrust laws, can those be applied retroactively, or is the horse already out of the barn? The horse is already out of the barn. That doesn't mean it can't be applied retroactively, but yet. But the first thing we need to do is, first of all, know where we're at, which I think we do. Secondly, we need to create rules to stop the further consolidation within agriculture, food, and retail, and then break up the big boys. 4 corporations controlling over 70% of the pork, 4 corporations controlling over 85% of the beef slaughter. Some of those corporations are the exact same corporations. JBS is the #1 in beef, Brazilian corporation. They're #2 in pork. They control around 25% of the pork in our country, and they own Pilgrim's Pride Poultry. So if our antitrust regulators they need to regulate them not only with their own protein, but you can't have them owning multiple proteins, because then they're able to play them off of each other so that they can make more money everywhere. It doesn't make any sense. Regarding recent rulings against the EPA and the Clean Water Act, specifically saying trying to enforce pollutants from entering ephemeral streams. The governor also says that this causes excess money and effort to farmers. What evidence is there to support that enforcing rules protects streams, or that it actually costs farmers money? And has any state overturned bills like Senate Bill 391, which is a bill that was passed in 2019 to take away Missouri?
Well, the problem is, we don't have rules to protect our streams. And so we don't have nutrient standards for streams. And so you look at the situation, I think it's the Illinois River, Arkansas flows into Oklahoma, right? And Oklahoma sued and won one result of that was nutrient standards were placed on the Illinois River for nitrogen and phosphorus. And lo and behold, guess what happened? The nutrient levels started to decline, and they're not where they should be yet. But we need these metrics at which we can judge our waters. And so we don't have nutrient standards for streams, and nutrient pollution is our biggest problem in the Corn Belt. And so we don't regulate. And so that's step one, is to get the nutrient standards in streams, and then take enforcement acts to get the water where it needs to be to meet those standards. And I'm sorry, I forgot the question.
So it's about streams.
Oh, does it cost a farmer? Well, I hear all the time farmers say, oh, well, nutrients are expensive. I don't want to waste them. Well, not really. We lose from Iowa in our streams about 600 million pounds of nitrogen per year. Leave the state in our streams, 600 million pounds. Some years it's over 1 billion pounds. And so if it was really that valuable, would we really be losing this much? I would say no. And so when we look at corn farming, the cost of nutrients for that crop, it's really pretty low compared to a lot of the other costs like seed, insurance, and land, and so forth.
Thank you for the question. Jess, other than high lead levels in your community, are you seeing other negative impacts right now that you can speak to, or just not all the negative impacts in total? Because then we'd be here all day. But yeah, just an example.
The lead is a big deal. I talked to somebody who is actually running for Congress in Missouri and asked her what she does because she has 2 children. And she said she double filters all of her water and doesn't, drink out of the tap. I grew up drinking out of the tap, which is probably what's wrong with me actually. But I grew up, drinking out of the tap, and so it's become second nature though that I feel bad. I don't let my daughter drink the water. I pour filtered water on her toothbrush at this point because of what is going on in Missouri.
Think about being a kid. Think about being a kid and having to witness that, and not completely understanding. I mean, I can't imagine that. I think most of these questions have been, and a lot of y'all had really good questions. They sort of overlap each other. I think they've almost all been answered. Does anybody else have any more postcards that they want to hand forward? You've got one more that you're working on? Okay. Curtis, do you want to say something?
I thought you never asked.
Yeah.
So let me address financial liability, because there's a question, is this going to cost farmers more? And of course the corollary to that is that going to make food cost more? Is that going to, are farmers going to be able to make a living? Well, I don't know if it's a perfect example, but I'd say most of us are in favor of mufflers and brakes on trucks, right? And I'm sure that costs all those small businesses who own trucks a lot more than if we just leave those things off. But we don't really question that, right? And I think that's kind of where we need to be here, is we need to say, suck it up, Buttercup. Yeah, you got to keep the shit out of the water. I'm sorry that upsets you or that it might cost you an extra $10. And if that's really a reason you can't farm, then the system is much more broken than you just not getting along with the regulations. So the flip side of that is this. Can you make a living doing what I'm doing? Well, one, yes. Okay, unequivocally, yes. I'm not the only one. I know thousands of small farmers who are making a living doing what we're doing. It's not easy. You have to be smart. You have to be flexible. But when has entrepreneurship ever been easy, right? When has stewardship ever been easy? I'm not going to soft soap anybody. In fact, I've chased off more interns from farming than I've gotten into it. I've hosted about 100 interns on my farm for the last 15 years. The interns, some of them were short term, some were long term. And about 50 of those went away going, yep, that's not something I want to do. And I consider that a success, because they need to understand it's better than they bought a farm and get halfway down the road and go, oh crap, I don't really like this, and this is too hard, I can't do this. But the other 50 know not just that I can do this, but I can do this, and if I do it well, that can be as successful as any other lifestyle. And I know we never talk about sex, money, politics. Here we are. We've hit at least 2 of the 3, and we're not going to get to the 3rd, I hope. But money. So let me just be real transparent, because I think it's important. It's important we talk about whether farms are making it or not, and how we measure that. I mentioned before I had a French mentor who said he would say, people will call me greedy because I like to talk about money. But he said, it's an easy way to measure things, right? He's right. So my farm, my 25 acres, we grossed just under $500,000 last year. I took home with my family of we have 6 kids that are still in the home. I took home about $65,000. That's not a lot of money, but everybody's shot. Everybody's dressing fine. We're all under. We're all got a roof over our heads. We took about 6 weeks of vacations last year. I took a month-long road trip to the West Coast. The year before that, we went to Costa Rica for a week and Honduras for a week. I'm okay.
You eat well.
I eat really well. Well, actually, cracked carrots and the holy tomatoes and all that. But the point is to say, it's a viable way to make a living. And I think that's important. And I hope nobody's offended by just doubting the money stuff there. But if we don't talk about it, then it is the elephant in the room, right? And that's been the case for farmers for a long time. It's challenging to get in a room full of farmers and get them to talk frankly about whether they are actually making it or not. And that's true whether they're small-scale sustainable or whether they're large commodities. Most of them really either kind of choose not to know because they've got their head in the sand because they don't want to know the end's coming. I'll leave you one more thing here to kind of highlight that. I have a friend who works for the FDIC. Yeah, maybe that's it. No, sorry, Federal Reserve. Works at Federal Reserve. And he does commodity stuff. So he's up in Nebraska, but he monitors Midwest grains, right? And I asked him, this was when the soybean crunch, when our illustrious leader a few years back decided to yank the carpet out from under the soybean growers. Some of you may not know that there was this whole trade war with China. The immediate outcome for the farmers in America was not at all positive. Soybean prices tanked. The Brazilians stepped in, said, "Oh, we'll be glad to serve you," and it really hasn't gotten back, and I don't know that it will. I said, so how are these farmers going to deal with this? Because we got guys out there who are farming 10,000 acres with the promise of just a fair profit. I mean, when we say somebody's farming 10,000 acres, they are not taking home $1 million a year, right? They're just barely making it. And he said, well, the good news is this. He said, well, their equity is still more than their debt. I don't know how many of you that scared. That terrified me. You're telling me that the measure of a healthy farm is that somebody who owns 10,000 acres doesn't owe quite as much as he or she left in the farm? That's success? You're going to tell me that I have as a fully mature farmer who, in many cases, inherited a lot of their farm or has bought up fire sale deals in the 80s, and now the best they can hope for is to owe a little bit less on an operating, by the way, this is not a mortgage, we're talking about an operating loan than what their land's worth. That's not financial health. So we need to address that at the policy level where we have to say that's not what health looks like. But we also have to just address it as the elephant in the room in these gatherings and say, hey, we need to make sure that our farms are financially healthy as well as ecologically healthy, or we won't have sustainable, healthy farms and ecosystems.
That was perfect. And I think we're going to end it after this.
Actually, I have a question. I read Chris's book, and there were some things in there that should be terrible. And we have not really addressed them. Here's 3 things. Iowa has the 2nd highest cancer rate in the United States. Good, clean living Iowans up there with all that fair share. The 2nd highest cancer rate in the United States. Do you think that the quality of the water, doctor, has anything to do with that? Here's the second point. 80 to 90% of all the rivers and lakes in Iowa are no longer safe for human contact. We're not talking about drinking, just you can't touch the water because it appears you might get cancer. That affects me personally. The third thing, what happens happens to land value when there's a CAFO next door? According to the realtors in Iowa, having a CAFO next door drops your land value by 82%. Now let's just imagine you bought a farm. You're a young farmer. You borrowed $100,000 to buy 20 acres because you really admire where model farmers do it. The CAFO moves in next door, and all of a sudden, your land is not worth nearly what the loan is that you still owe to the bank. You're no longer really organic because of all that fluid and flies and filth that floods your farm every time the wind blows the wrong way or it rains. I'd like to hear your opinion because I've read a lot of your book, and this has been a very illuminating discussion. But I came here in part to hear you talk about these awful things.
Okay, well, it's true, Iowa has the second highest cancer rate in the United States, and we're the only state where the cancer rate is increasing. And so, you know, in these sorts of things, it's difficult to tie these things back to one thing or another. It's hard. But the fact is, we've had 7,000 private wells in Iowa contaminated with nitrate above the safe drinking water limit. And we've known for the better part of 20 years that people drinking high nitrate water have a higher incidence of bladder cancer, especially women, thyroid cancer, colorectal cancers. We've known this. This is not new. And so when I talk about this, people react like, oh, was that just discovered? No, we've known it for 25 years. And so we've known it here in the U.S. We've known it from studies in the EU, in Wisconsin, Iowa, Nebraska, and elsewhere. And so can we say with a reasonable degree of certainty that our methods of farming affect human health? Absolutely they do. We've known for 25 years that kids in Iowa that go to schools that are close to CAFOs have much higher incidence of asthma. We've known for 20 years at least that if you live within a mile of a CAFO in Iowa, your chances of getting an antibiotic-resistant staph infection go through the roof. These are things that we've known for a long, long time, and you know, sometimes I don't talk about it because in my circle, you know, we've known it for so long, and these things have just gone unaddressed by state government. And our public health system is terrified to talk about it. And, you know, we have a College of Public Health at the University of Iowa. You know, why don't we talk about these things? It's a good question. And so in my circle, we always say, well, where's the outrage, right? We know all this stuff. Where's the outrage? And we always say, well, we need bodies on the curb. That's the expression we use. We need bodies on the curb. Well, you know, with COVID, we had the bodies on the curb, and, you know, it really didn't affect people's perspective on things. And so do these human health effects, are they important to us here tonight? Probably very important to all of us. Are they important to the masses? I'm not sure that they are. And so I think there can be no doubt that the corn soy CAFO production system has human health effects in the corn belt.
I think people just sort of feel disenfranchised as well. They feel powerless. I mean, when we go and talk to people about this issue that we're talking about right now, all over Missouri, the vast majority of people are shaking their head yes. These people are very different politically, very different people. I just think that, you know, I go to our state capital and we organize a huge base of people. We organized a huge base of people against Senate Bill 391, which took away local control. Literally thousands came to the Capitol or sent emails and made phone calls. Possibly 10,000. Very few in support other than the farmers, the cattlemen, all the commodity groups, you know, all the lobby groups. And they still passed it to take away local control. And then we saw repercussions at MRCC from that, just specifically. In fighting for 20 years, people making their voices heard. Everybody in the Capitol knows that people in Missouri for local control, the vast majority of us out here, and they still do it because corporate interests said so. So, you know, I think that there's also our goal at MRCC, and I think our goal here too, is to help build that power so that we can fight back. With that, I get to say, Chris can talk later. Todd, do you want to come up and, yeah, great, thank you.
I'll hop up here. So I'm going to stay right there. Would you join me, please, in thanking our panelists for all of you for being here tonight. Chris, we want to give you one last word. You may just have taken it. If you want to, you're welcome to give me one last word.
I'll take it. I mean, how often does somebody give you the opportunity to give the last word? What I want to say is, it's not hopeless, right? And, a lot of people do feel that way in Iowa and elsewhere, that it's hopeless. And so I tell this story, and it goes back to my book, where I mentioned Howard Zinn a number of times in my book, and I like Howard Zinn's writing and his books, and I found out Jess likes it too. And so I admire his writing, and I admire him because he was in academia, and he sort of took his message to general audiences, which is what I do. And so I had a book event in Fairfield, Iowa, and a woman came up to me and said, "Oh, I love how you mentioned Howard Zinn in your book." And she said, "I want to tell you a story. I went to the University of Wisconsin, and when I was there as a student, Howard Zinn came there and talked. And he said something to me that I'll never forget. And that thing was that everybody thinks when Rosa Parks, the Civil Rights Movement began when Rosa Parks got on the bus. And he said, no, it didn't begin then. It began 15 or 20 years before that with people meeting in churches and schools and in their homes and paving the way for Rosa Parks to get on that bus, okay? And so I think that's how we need to think about things. And it's not hopeless. It's not hopeless because the masses do feel like we deserve better in the Corn Belt than what we've got in terms of environment. And so that's my last word, almost. And the other thing I want to tell you is I was so impressed with this woman sitting next to me last night. I told her, I said, "Woman, you're the real deal." And so I sure hope that as Missourians you all get to vote for her someday. And so there's my last word.
I think it's okay for us to get confrontation on that. We do have one more person who'd like to add something in closing. John Moore was president of Missouri University for 22 years. He's been a lifelong environmentalist and advocate for clean water. John, would you just offer some final thoughts for us tonight?
I don't need that, Todd. I think I can make myself heard.
You know, that's what you boys got.
You know, I came in here tonight, and Dan Childs said, I'd like you to say a few things at the end, kind of put it all together and crank everybody up and send them out here to do great and amazing things. And you know, I have listened to this panel tonight. And Jess, I think you put it together better than, you put everybody's comments together. You said, this is all related. Everything that we're talking about here tonight is related, from our declining rural communities, our concern about agriculture, our concern about corporate entities coming in to take over farming. And I'll tell you, that's not going to change. It's not going to change, but it's a concern that we all have. And we all are here because we're concerned about that. Our right to clean water. And some of you are here particularly because of the issue that we've had right in our backyard. And that's the issue up here at Pleasant Hope with prime beef packers and the concern about what that implies for the Pomme de Terre River and that watershed and the lake. And it's a concern that we all share. You know, we live here in the Ozarks, but in our state of Missouri, we are blessed with two great rivers, with wonderful streams, springs, and we have groundwater here in our state, and particularly here in the Ozarks, that is to us what oil is to Saudi Arabia. We've got abundant water, and by and large it is clear water and good water. And Chris Jones has come down from Iowa, and you know, it reminds me of the story about the little kid who was going to do something ornery in school, and his little buddy was ahead of him, and the teacher just slapped the hell out of him. And the little kid got the idea. He said, I'm not going to do that. We've got Iowa. Iowa is that little kid that got slapped, and we're sitting here in Missouri, and you know, what can we do about it? You know, I worked for a number of years after I was here at Drury. I was the president of a water quality foundation, the Upper White River Basin Foundation, now doing business as Ozark Water Watch. And in that work, I learned that, you know, the greatest challenge that we have is all of us in this state and beyond, because fundamentally, people are messy. People are messy. We make messes wherever we go, and it's really too bad. We don't mean to most of the time, but today we've got, you know, corporate agriculture that's coming in, and they make messes, and sometimes they don't mean to. I think, you know, and we're not going to change it. I think most of them probably want to be responsible and to do it right. Sometimes they don't. So what do we do about that? How do we respond to those, you know, the fact that we make messes as a bunch of people? One of the things that you've done, and we need more people to do, is to become educated about the threats to our watershed. And then beyond that, public policy. How do we make public policy? Where do we make it? We make it at the local level. We used to be able to some extent, for agriculture. We can't do that anymore, so it's in Jefferson City. It's in the legislative process. And then beyond that, we have agencies that are commissioned to go out and take care of our environment. Our Department of Natural Resources here, our Conservation Commission, Clean Water Commission, and so on. But DNR has the responsibility to regulate what's going on, and they don't always get the resources, and they have limitations. So, you know, beyond that, what do we do? And I think you all have touched on it. Chris, you've touched on it. Chris, you've touched on it. Tim, you've pressed on it, and you've eloquently touched on it, Curtis. You know, we have power within ourselves to deal with these issues if we can mobilize enough people in this state to assure that we have the right to clean water. That may be the biggest legacy that we can leave for the people that follow us, for our kids and our grandkids, so that our rivers, and we're particularly attuned to it here in the Ozarks. I've been all over North Missouri. I know the water's different up there, somewhat. But here in the Ozarks, you know, it's what defines this region. It's what, you know, brings tourism here. It's what supports our economy. And if you start, when you go down to Table Rock Lake, if it turns green, it's gonna hurt us. If we drink our water and it's not pure, if it's got lead in it, that's a concern. So what we've got to do is mobilize, you know, this state some way or another. The Guardrails Project that Dan and Dave and others are working on. We're trying to think about ways to get this message out so that all over this state people are concerned. Our governor has said the right thing. Mike Parsons has said, you know, we got to have good water in our state. We ought to keep it good. But talk's cheap, folks. Talk is cheap. You know, I worked here in a college. We had a wonderful group of faculty. And I never told them the secret. And the secret was they had more power to run this place than they ever knew. I don't know if you'd agree with me, Todd, but you know, they were powerful. And you know what? For 20-some, over 2 decades, I stayed ahead of them. I never let them in on that secret, but I'm going to let you in on a secret. And that secret is that if we can mobilize enough people in this state, we can get the laws fixed and the regulators in the process of seeing to appropriate regulation, and we'll have our right to clean water. So now that's my message. Go on out and raise hell, and we'll get this done here one of these days.
All three to go in front. Thank you for being here tonight. And let's follow up with this. There's so much here that we can't just let's see. Thank you.
How we get paid?